start with your brief introduction, but before that, we are glad that you could spare some time for us to accept the invitation on behalf of Samyak Drishti Foundation. So I'll start for everyone here. She's Dr. Vasudha Pande is a professor at Lady Shri Ram College, Delhi. She has authored many books like Culture in Indian Subcontinent, Volume 1, and of course, Cultures in Indian Subcontinent, Volume 2. She has contributed to many chapters in books like Divergent Historiographical Traditions, a comparative study of Gorkha rule in Kumaon and far western in Nepal, in M.P. Joshi and S. Thapa, J. Pant and R. Shah before emergence of nation states. She has also written many papers, including Making Kumaon Modern Family and Custom, Making Kumaon Modern Customs and Beliefs, Stratification in Kumaon, occasional paper at Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. She has written many book reviews in journals like review of the book Becoming India by A. Alam, review of a book about Imposter by Parthy Chatterjee. Yes, she has presented many papers in national and international conferences, among which we have Changing Landscape in the Himalayas, the Gorkha Empire, Unfolding Central Himalaya, the Cradle of Culture International Seminar in Doon Library and Research Center in December. We welcome you, ma'am. On behalf of Samyak Drishti Foundation, you can proceed with the session.
Thank you very much for this invitation, and I'm very glad to be here with you. It's slightly different from, of late I have only been giving class lectures like to people, to someone like Anupriti. But I welcome this opportunity to speak about something which is very close to us in terms of COVID-19. We know what it means to us. I can see that there are people. Can you hear me? Is there a problem? Hello? It would be, I think, useful if we could switch off, turn off mute the mic of our own things, unless we are speaking. Otherwise, there's always a disturbance in the background. I will also do that when I'm not speaking.
We have done it for you, ma'am. We have.
Okay. Yeah, no. I don't know. I realized somebody else had muted me. Anyhow, I think let me start. I think it's important to talk about what COVID-19 means for us and how we understand it, so that we can think of linking this to the future. I mean, many of us are very afraid of what the future will hold for us. I'm already in the 60 plus category, so I'm more to be afraid of. But that's not the real issue. I think the issue that we will have to look at, and I was thinking about this, is the figures we all know. We know that there is I'm not sure about the statistics. I don't think I'm going to rely on statistics for this. We all know how skewed the statistics may be in the context of India. But we know that this pandemic is something which is really creating major problems for the fabric of our society and economy. That is what we have to look at, and we have to try and understand the reasons for this pandemic. It's not just an epidemic. We had epidemics like cholera, etc. But the pandemic is something which is of global dimensions. And I think the globality of it, the fact that we are now a part of an interconnected world through flight, through railways, through all kinds of travel that we have, that is, I think, the importance of understanding today's world. And the global scenario, India, we are all good nationalists, we are all concerned about the nation state, but I think the future is a global one. I think from the day man went to space and spied the earth as a round globe, as Armstrong did, from that day, as it were, we are a connected world. We are part of a connected world. And what I'm therefore going to talk about today is not about just the pandemic in the way it is, but the pandemic as it tells us and explains to us the crisis of this interconnected world, where we are connected through consumption, we are connected through affection, we are connected through many other products, ways of being, seeing, perceiving, understanding. There's so much that we are interconnected about, and it is here that I think, and that is why I chose to bring in the connection also with climate change. Because I think for a long time, people like me, we have been convinced and persuaded by our scientists, by scientific work. Though I'm not a scientist, I'm a social scientist, but I think it's very important for us to not abdicate. We have to understand what the science are telling us. We know that 97% of scientists believe that there is climate change. And this climate change has actually, in a sense, and this is where it links up, the climate change is also something which we have to link to the pandemic. The pandemic is part of the changing nature of global reality. The fact is that we have to understand this, the fact that it's a global world, and the climate also is a global scenario. So in this whole thing, when we look at climate change and relate it to the pandemic, I would like to say I will only focus on these two things, and I think it's important to understand that is what is climate change and what is it that I'm trying to talk about. It's a huge area. We all know, those of us who live in Delhi or in the big cities of India, we know how terrible air pollution is. But climate change is much larger than just water pollution, air pollution, etc. It is the result of the increasing energy that we are using up in our everyday lives, and it is also because of the fossil fuels that we have been using. We have been changing. Of course, we have microclimates all over the world. We have different kinds of climatic scenarios, but there has been a secular trend across the world of temperatures going up, and that, I think, is what I would really talk about as climate change. What does climate change mean? And how does it impact us? That is significant. Climate change, the increasing temperature. I mean, when sometimes I talk to students about IPCC and 2 degrees of 2 degrees temperature, people tell me, oh, but what is 2 degrees? Actually, it's not like that. It's not as simple as that. It means that it's going to result in completely different kinds of environmental habitats for us. And that, I think, is where I link it with COVID-19. Then what is happening is that as human beings and the anthropogenic means that which human beings are generating, the world that the human beings have produced over a very long period of time, over the Holocene, which is a long geological period. In that period, we have transformed the world and its landscapes. As a matter of fact, when we talk about it in environment history, we find that there is no pristine climate left anywhere. There is nowhere where human beings have left anything untouched. Every piece that we see in the world has the impact of humans on it. There is nothing as like a pristine, pure habitat. And this and the link with climate change, this is a human impact, and this is where even geologists agree that there is a new word which they have coined called the Anthropocene. So human beings have had a tremendous impact on this climate, but this warming up of the climate, which we all know, which is recognized by world leaders in the Indian IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, which all of us are aware of. In that, the negotiations were therefore about how to reduce the impact of the carbon emissions, etc., of the carbon in the air, and how to therefore fight climate change. But somewhere 2008, I hope you know what 2008 means. I'm sure. I think Anukriti is an economics student. There was a depression. And we all know that actually that derailed the climate sort of protocols. And we know that, as a matter of fact, at that point of time, very many people decided that environment doesn't matter, economics is more important. And therefore, this link between consumption and production and climate is something that continues to be significant, but it seems to have been on the back burner. People kept saying, no, we have to increase GDP, we have to increase this, but we don't really, so it doesn't matter. And it is in this that COVID-19 has come to us as a reminder that if we don't take this seriously, we're going to be in trouble. And I think this is what I think we should discuss, because what has been happening is that there have been, one is that our needs have been increasing, the way in which our animal production, I would say, production of animal sort of meat, protein, you can say, for humans has increased, and the way in which it is being produced has, of course, created all kinds of major problems. But beyond that, what we also find that when we look at these contexts, we find that there is as the climate landscapes are changing, and forests are being denuded, new areas are being invaded, we find that the interaction between man and animals has changed significantly. Let me remind you that the first time when anthropogenic activity affected the world, it was when agriculture started. And it's very important to remember that hunter-gatherers did not have the illnesses that agricultural populations faced, because agricultural populations lived with livestock, they lived with animals, they domesticated, and there was a lot of illnesses that came through that. But of course, because it was not so large, because there were large areas of natural landscape which remained, therefore these diseases, they were epidemics. You know what happened in the plague. We know about plague in Bombay, we know plague in Surat, we know plague all over the world, the Black Death of Europe. But the zoonotic diseases, as they are now known as, these are a clear product of changing climate and the very close proximity between wild animals and human beings. And I think I would like you to note this. I had made a presentation for you, but I don't know whether we have the time, because it's only half an hour, and I'll just try and show you this. This is about climate, but I would like you to see this. That climate change has been can you see it? Oh, sorry, I have to shift it. Just 1 minute. I have to put it in the screen. Just hold on. Host disabled attendee, but can I share the screen with you? And I may be able to show this. Share screen. Can you see my? No, I don't think it's coming in.
To share the screen.
Yeah, just hold on. If I can, maybe I should just open climate. Sorry, I don't think it's coming on to that. Let it be, it doesn't matter. I think I'll just carry on. So what we find is, what are zoonotic diseases? Zoonotic diseases are the product of this interaction between, I will send you this later on. I can send you the presentation that I've made, it doesn't really matter. But zoonotic diseases, therefore, are something that we have to be very concerned about. And we've had quite a few outbreaks, S1N1, the other pandemics before this, which were not pandemics, which may have been more smaller in area. Even your HIV actually is a product of this. So zoonotic diseases are something which we will have to tackle again in this climate change, because climate change means now that areas which were deserts may have rainfall and they change, and therefore the species will also keep changing, and human beings adapting to that plus animal, those interactions are going to be of very serious magnitude, and zoonotic diseases therefore is something that is going to plague us. Do not think that the inoculation itself is going to get rid of this scenario. I hope it does. I mean, none of us would wish this on humanity at all. But at the same time, I hope you know that there is the possibility. There are so many viruses in this interaction. There is this possibility of a new one coming from the pig. So this is where remember, bats and human beings didn't really interact so closely, but with the changing climate, habitats, this is something, and I think this is what I want us to understand, that what may happen, what we have seen is many of us, I have enjoyed this sitting at home. I live in the 4th floor, and now I am very close to the trees. The trees are as high as my 4th floor, and I watch birds. I watched the full spring season this year. I watched the jamun flowers, and I watched the jamun coming to life. But the fact is that this closeness to nature doesn't mean that we can undo what we have done over a long period of time. There is a naive belief in a large number of people that because we're not driving cars, animals are coming onto the roads, and that there is no restoration that is going to happen so easily. The carbon dioxide that we have pumped into the oceans and the air is not something which will go away, even if we were to continue in the lockdown mode. We must remember that climate change is a reality which, as soon as things open up, I'm sure there will be more fury, there will be more need to make money, more consumption, and people will this frenzied consumption is going to increase this problem rather than decrease it. So I think climate change is a reality which we will have to factor into our lives. I had in my presentation, I had also shown how what reactions people have. There are lots of studies about this. But let us not believe that we can restore nature so easily. The restoration of nature is going to take much longer, and this is where many of us will have to be extremely alert. Many of us, I don't know how much time do I have, Anukriti? I have 15 to 20 minutes. No? How much time? Yeah. Okay. So I'll just carry on. So this is something where we will have to talk about, because what I feel is that interestingly, what is happening is that if on the one hand, many of us are realizing the reality of the climate change, we are realizing the problems of it. On the other hand, governments, as we can see, economics is demanding that they actually have more production, and clearly more production. What was India very successful at during the pandemic? It has produced PPEs. The number of PPEs, I hope you know, those private protection, they are all plastic. There is so much more plastic. Look at the masks. The way we are through those throwaway masks, we are generating more waste. Have you thought about it? Have we even thought about the amount of plastic? You and I, everybody is using gloves, plastic gloves. We are using masks. We are throwing them away. I recently saw a video when she said, "Sabzi jo आप लाए हैं, उसको प्लास्टिक फेंक दीजिए." अरे प्लास्टिक में क्यों लाए हैं? ये जो सवाल है, ये अभी वो रहेंगे. These are not going to go away. We have to understand that, as a matter of fact, to fight the pandemic, we'll have to be Atmanirbhar, but not Atmanirbhar to plastics and through increasing our footprint, our carbon print on the world. So that is one part of it. And a lot of people think that we can have green change. That the green, I'm part of a Teachers for Climate Change group, and many of my colleagues are very optimistic and believe that the government will bring in green policies. But if you look at it, where do we see are the governments thinking green at all? Brazil, Bolsonaro. The Amazon is being stripped while we are speaking. The stripping of the Amazon And the death of those indigenous people who protected the Amazon through COVID is something which will be irreparable. This was the lungs of the world. The Amazon forest was the lungs through which we breathe. And the Amazon has disappeared while we are speaking. It's almost gone. And the people who defended it have died. This reminds me, of course, of another historical thing like this, which is when the Native Americans of both South and North America died, not because Europeans fought them bravely in wars, but rather through the germs and the infections that they contracted through the travelers, the Europeans. They died. I mean, there's a very interesting book called Germs and Steel, how germs wiped out local American populations and made way for the European onslaught, which changed not only the demography but the natural landscape of both the Americas. Please remember that. So similarly, this is happening here while we are speaking. You and I may be aware of green policies. The other thing, of course, and I think I will try and end with that so that we can have more questions. But what is interesting that even our government, and I think this is what I find something that we must look at, that our present government, the present regime, is all for sort of, and I think it's important. We have to talk about economy. Without a successful economy, India cannot drive anything. I mean, not itself even. So interestingly, what we find is that over the years, the environmental activists, and this is something which has been an ongoing process. We had got something called an environmental assessment process in place. I hope you know that. It started in the 1970s, but it has been going on. And in 2006, the environmental assessment protocol was in place. The government, anything that was ratified by the government, any kind of big project, had to have an environmental clearance. And this was something which did create problems, not only for the NDA at the moment, but the earlier UPA as well. As a matter of fact, a lot of people were extremely critical of Manmohan Singh's government. And then I don't know if you know that there was this very famous lady called Jayanti Natarajan who was in charge of the environment ministry. And there was this whole thing that Jayanti ji ka tax to dena hi padega. But actually that kind of thing is highly problematic. That we see this as a tax, we see this as a problem, and clearly this was something which the BJP or the NDA had been very critical of here in the UPA regime, and I must tell you that the UPA regime did suffer from this as well. But the fact is that now we know that given the fact that this economy is in doldrums, the Indian economy is facing very severe problems, the argument is not going to be to have a green production, to think in terms of green policies. As a matter of fact, we seem to be saying, doesn't matter, जैसे भी हो इसको रिवाइव करना है, इसकी पहले सांस तो लेने दो इसको, फिर हम बाद में बात करेंगे. बट ये जो आर्ग्यूमेंट आने वाला है, जो आ चुका है ऑलरेडी, this is, I think, even more dangerous, because this is the moment when we could have turned away. We could have said, no, we have to think, we have to have a government which is in sync with this. We have to have economic production, we have to have growth, we can have it as sustainable, we can have it in agriculture, we can have it in different ways. And I think that was the Gandhian answer. Let me remind you, it's not, though आजकल तो मोदी जी भी उसी की बात कर रहे हैं, आत्मनिर्भरता, लेकिन वो आत्मनिर्भरता बहुत फर्क थी, और इसीलिए उसके बारे में आज सोचना है, क्योंकि वो environmental, and though Gandhi was not an environmentalist, because there was no environmentalism when he was an activist, nevertheless, I think it was important for the environment. So I think this is where we have to think. You know that there has been a move to change that act, the Environmental Act, and many of us have signed and written letters and asked for for a change in that. And I hope some of you will also think of it. The last date was actually June 30th, but now, thanks to the Delhi High Court, the last date is August 10th and 11th. And I would urge you to look at both the earlier government orders, the gazette notification, and look at what this government is proposing, where environmental clearances will not be required. I think environmental assessments are important. They should remain, and I think our future lies at this conjuncture of our future. We have to be thinking green and yet economic. I'm not therefore saying that we should run away from production. I'm not saying that Atmanirbharta will just mean isolation. But I think we must, and this is why I think the pandemic has brought this upon us. But if we don't learn the lessons of the pandemic, it's going to be worse. That's what I think. I will stop here. I don't know how much time I have, and I'm willing to take questions, criticism, anything that you have to say to me. I would be happy to. Disagreements, all of that would be welcome. Yes, Anupriti?
Small steps really matter in combating climate change, even if in a personal life, if we stop the use of consumption, just carry a jute bag to our groceries, that even matters a lot.
Of course, yes.
Yes, Dr. Vasudha, firstly, thank you for sharing your knowledge with all of us here today. And two specific things that I really thought would be very useful about what you shared with everybody is to, for us as citizens as well, to take the initiative on our own instead of just relying that there will be a policy and only then will something happen.
Absolutely.
Take it in our hands and try reducing the carbon footprint that we as individuals produce at a everyday basis.
Yeah.
And also how you specifically mentioned that since because of the pandemic right now, our focus as well as the policymakers' focus is just towards the pandemic. Because of that, we many times tend to think that the nature is self-healing right now. But as rightly pointed by you, that is not the case, because many people have that assumption in their minds.
Yeah.
So thank you for raising that. It has given a thought to me as well, and I believe to everybody attending today's session, of how important it is to think about that the nature is not restoring on its own, but we will also have to take measures.
Yeah.
So really, we at Samyak Drishti Foundation really thank you for taking out the time and sharing your knowledge with all of us, giving us some or the other pointers to think upon, ponder upon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would just like to talk about one little thing which is very important, which is about how in India we are a terribly unequal society. You know that if you look at, there's a very famous economist, Piketty. He's written the most unequal society in the world at the moment. And where is that inequality? If all of us start looking at it, it is in the energy consumption. So the poor people don't produce climate change. Poor are not here again. Like COVID is an illness of the rich, it has affected the poor, it reaches the poor eventually, but it is a global pandemic which comes through air travel, etc. Similarly, I would like to say that let us look at our, and you're absolutely right, ma'am, about the fact that we have to look at our own energy carbon footprint, because the amount of energy I consume is so much higher than what most people consume. At the moment, I'm sorry to say, but I'm in an air-conditioned room. I feel extremely guilty about it, but it's unbearably hot. And but the fact is that my energy consumption is so much higher than many other people in this country. So I think we have to think when we talk about global equations, when we look at nationalism, we have to not only look at the inequality in the world. America consumes much more than us. It has already apparently bought up all the COVID medicine. That's what America is used to. But fact is that there's inequality amongst us also, and we have to be very alert to that. So I mean, I know you are a foundation, and I hope, and you're talking about Samyak Drishti, so in equity and equitable, that is something which all of us have to think of very seriously. And when we talk about green policies, we should also be thinking about the differences between us in consumption, so that when we are formulating a policy, then we also think of those who are not that fortunate, who may want to have a fridge, who may want to have an AC. So how do we do that equitably? I think that is what I think equity along with this is something which we have to keep thinking. And there is going to be no restoration. Let me tell you, that is an illusion, and it's a delusion thing. Nature cannot be restored. The oceans are full of carbon already. We have major problems. If we pump more carbon into the world, temperatures will keep going up. This is the hottest summer on record in the world, 2010.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's remember, it's not going to. It won't go away. Even if we have reduced our thing, but that's not going to go away. It will be next year will be hotter.
Yes.
So I think I'll stop here.